So, came into Sunday with the 49ers and Eagles as the only undefeated teams left in the NFL. Both teams were favored on the road, and both teams lost, shall we say,
backups.
Let's begin in the Meadowlands. Where the Eagles were 12-0 all-time, they had literally never lost to the Jets in recorded human history. But a 3-interception afternoon for Jalen Hurts changed New York's fortunes, and they eked out the 20-14 win. Breach, you mentioned this earlier in our little chat. So I'm going to take you to the fourth quarter. Come with me in this little time machine here. There's 1:50 left in the game, and Hurts has just thrown his final interception. The Jets begin their fateful drive on the Eagles' 8-yard line. They trail 14-12, and Philly has all their timeouts. First play, hand off to Breece Hall, and the Eagles defense basically ushers them into the end zone so they can get the ball back with, it turns out, 1:46 to go on the clock, and now they're down 6. But you thought the Jets should have been more self-aware in that moment, correct?
Yes. I thought the Eagles should have been. I don't think Eagles should have let the Jets score a touchdown there. The Eagles had 2 timeouts left, so let me just fix that real quick. They didn't have all 3 timeouts. So if I'm the Eagles and I am winning 14-12, I am hoping that the Jets run 3 plays. You have to use 2 of my timeouts. Then the Jets kick a field goal. They run, say, 40 seconds off the clock because you don't have a third timeout to get rid of that third down. So you're down to about 105, and now you are only trailing by 1 point. It's 15-14. Then the Eagles would have only needed a field goal on their final drive. So then you only need to get to about the 40. It shaves 35 to 40 yards off how much you need on that final drive. So the question is, would you rather have 1 minute and 5 seconds and no timeouts, knowing you only need to get to the Jets 40, considering how Jalen Hurts has played that day? Or would you rather have 2 timeouts, but be down a full entire touchdown?
Probably more like 55 seconds, right?
No, it'd be about a minute 5. There was a minute 46 when they got the ball. And
gotcha. Right. Okay. Yep.
I mean, maybe if one of the plays.
Yeah, okay, no, I got you. Yeah, the math is tricky, but yeah, like I think you're right. Like stop them and make them kick a field goal. Maybe they miss. Kickers are missing left and right.
Yeah, it was just wild that they just gave up that touchdown and said, because the Jets couldn't get a first down. They were at the 8-yard line. So that is just a whole plethora of things to talk about with this game, though, because we haven't even touched on, Brinson, what you can talk about is Jalen Hurts hurting.
Yeah. Was he hurting or he's just playing poorly?
No, hurting Debo's soul, all our Eagles fans.
Hurting Debo's soul, yes. And yeah, all our Eagles friends' souls. 3 interceptions for Jalen Hurts. Eagles didn't score their final 7 possessions. They finished the game with 14 points. They scored 2 touchdowns in their first 2 possessions. And what you saw from the Eagles in this game, and I had a Jalen Hurts double stack with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, and actually did like okay in fantasy. But if Devontae catches that touchdown and like houses it, he had a horrible drop. And this was a squeaky wheel game for him. But they came out knowing that DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner were out and were really, really aggressive in the passing attack. And I thought it looked good. Like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are getting open. And then it just sort of like the Jets kind of turned up the pressure and started getting home with the pass rush. Lane Johnson left the game. I don't think he came back. That was definitely a factor too. We've seen with Lane Johnson in Eagles teams in years past that when he is out, the offense can fall off a cliff. Like Carson Wentz's splits with or without Lane Johnson were crazy. Offense completely stalled out. Defense played fine, but the Jets sort of had that similar mojo that they had against the Bills in that game as well. Zach Wilson was a caretaker. Breece Hall was making plays. Garrett Wilson was making plays. And I think when we talk about, and we'll talk about the Niners in a minute, but when we talk about the fatal flaws for these 2 previously undefeated teams, the Eagles' fatal flaw was like, we're not totally confident in their offensive attack. Shane Steichen's gone. They're running at a slower pace. They are not as efficient. They're not as effective. And we're like, it'll come around. But, this is what we talked about in the preseason. There was a possibility of some regression by Jalen Hurts. Doesn't mean he gets turned into a bad quarterback. It just, he wasn't going to have the same season he did last year. And maybe that's happening.
Yeah, this team doesn't look to be the same as last year, but they were also 5-0 and probably should have won this game. Credit to Robert Saleh, and Breach talked about some of the mistakes at the end of that game. Zach Wilson, no interceptions. He played well. We saw Garrett Wilson go out with an ankle injury. He was hobbling towards the end, but he came back and had 90 yards. And that defense is absolutely balling, sort of like the other team we're going to talk about in a second in terms of keeping that offense in the game in Cleveland and San Francisco. But special shout out to Quinnen and Quincy, his brother Williams. defensive lineman and linebacker, and they were just game wreckers the entirety of that game. And Breach, I'll ask you this, and I'm going to ask this question a lot tonight because we're going to talk about some teams that are among the best in the NFL that laid some turd-like eggs in this week 6 here. Are you worried about the Eagles, or do you feel okay?
I would be a little bit worried. I mean, I feel like we've talked about already through the first 6 weeks of the season that Jalen Hurts just doesn't look as good as he did last year. Granted, he's an MVP candidate last year. He's playing an MVP level, and he has not been playing that same exact level. It'd be hard to do that 2 years in a row. But it was kind of creeping toward a game like this where he faced a very tough defense and he had a total meltdown. I mean, that's just uncharacteristic of what we've seen from him so far. But if I'm the Eagles, I'm worried about that. I'm worried about my secondary with the Dolphins on the schedule next week. I have a lot of worries if I'm Philadelphia. It looks like, they started the season with the easier part of their schedule and they took care of business. The Jets were supposed to be the end of that easy part of the schedule, but now you're going into a stretch where you have the Dolphins, Cowboys, Chiefs, and Bills, and 49ers. 5 of your next 6 games. Those are the teams I just mentioned. That is going to be rough. For instance.
So Lane Johnson, by the way, got hurt with about 8 minutes and 40 seconds left in the first quarter. The Eagles I believe they had that long pass to, maybe that one, it was a different drive. But anyway, they get down there, they score on that controversial Jalen Hurts touchdown where it looked like he fumbled, but he didn't, and they overturned it. They scored, I think it's like 7 or 8 plays later after Lane Johnson got hurt. 0 points afterwards, and only one drive that was longer than 30 yards. Like, if Lane Johnson is seriously injured, that is a concern.